So let's take a breath. And release whatever is ours to release at this moment. We see it just evaporating into the air like steam bubbling out of a pot of boiling water. And we let it go. And we settle into this place and this time. I invite you to do whatever you would like to do to be comfortable where you are. Knowing that the chair supports you, the earth supports the chair, and you can just be. Let's breathe again. And as we breathe into that knowing that we are peace, we are purpose, we are power, and we are prosperity. Let's take that into a couple of moments of silence. As we return to this place and time, we know that we can return to this place of peacefulness anytime we want to. As we reaffirm that we are power, we are peace, we are purpose, and we are prosperity. We give thanks for that this morning, as the divine lives in and through us. And with that, we say thank you and amen.
Amen.
So the title of my talk today, do you want to be a genius? Yeah, I see nods. Sure, I want to be a genius. Not necessarily, or maybe not necessarily, because what does that really mean to be a genius? What does that put on me if I'm a genius? Charles Fillmore says, extraordinary zeal in the accomplishment of some ideal develops what is called genius. Now, isn't that an interesting way to think about it? Extraordinary zeal in the accomplishment of some ideal is genius. Have you ever worked pretty hard to accomplish something you hold dear to you? Yeah. Did you think of yourself as a genius? Okay, so we can rethink of ourselves and who we are. You know, I'm watching CBS Sunday Morning again this morning, and I have a couple of examples I'm going to bring into my talk. But as I watched that show this morning, I thought, you know, every one of these stories is that. That's what every one of those stories is. Someone saying, I'm going to put energy and effort into something I hold dear. And if that's what genius is, it's accessible to all of us. And we all probably have been a genius at some time in our lives. Did you ever think genius might look like that? Okay. So did you just have a window open in your brain? going, I can think about genius in a different kind of way. One of the greatest examples we have in history of something putting extraordinary zeal into the accomplishment of an ideal that he held dear was Jesus. Jesus wasn't somebody who said, hey, look at me, look how smart I am, right? No. He was among the people. He told stories. He told simple stories, which today we call parables. He lived and breathed among the people. And he would say again and again, it is not I, but the Father within me, or the divine within me that does the works. So it wasn't about drawing attention to himself. It was about putting energy and effort into something he held dear. So when you think of this word genius, here's some more images we can take with us today. There's an image you can put into your brain, into your heart, and say, this is what genius can look like. Another thing I found out this week is that genius comes from the same root word meaning guardian deity. Now, isn't that an interesting way to think of genius? Guardian deity. Guardian, perhaps, of that value or that ideal held dear. That you are such a guardian of it that you commit to it. And that's what genius is. Charles Fillmore also said, never judge zeal by the noise it makes. And we hear a lot of noise around us, don't we? Especially now in election season. Oh my God. You just want to leave the television off because you get bombarded with this stuff. Well, as I was looking at this phrase, never judge zeal by the noise it makes, I started thinking about what kind of noise have I encountered in my life that really has been absolutely meaningless noise. And I thought of some very noisy motorcycles. Especially, I shouldn't say especially, what I thought of was the Harley Davidson. Has anybody ever been at a stop sign, a stoplight next to a Harley and had it roar off next to you and you wish you didn't have your window open? I was at a university in Wisconsin for a number of years, and we had employers come to campus frequently they gave talks and classes, they came to hire students, they came for career days, all kinds of things. Well, Harley is based in Milwaukee. So we often had Harley Davidson people on campus. And I remember one time being part of a conversation where somebody asked, what's with the noise on the Harley? What's that for? It must serve some purpose. And the representative said, no, it really doesn't serve a purpose. It's part of our trademark. Donna believes it serves a purpose.
Yes, loud pipes save lives. That is an actual sticker on the back
I
of the
agree with
helmet.
that 100%.
Oh, I see. So they
Loud pipes save lives.
Okay.
You hear them.
Okay, so we can create that purpose. We can create that purpose. What the rep said to me about 15 years ago was, it's our trademark.
Yeah.
It's our trademark. We have a trademark sound because when you hear that sound, you know it's a Harley. But he said, it doesn't serve, let me say, it doesn't serve any mechanical purpose. There's no mechanical function for this sound. So I happened, as I thought about Harleys, I happened to come, and I don't even know how I get to these places sometimes on the internet, but this was posted, this is September 2, 2014, so last month, the Urban Milwaukee website. This past weekend was Harley's annual Milwaukee Rally, which typically means an excess of ear-splitting Harley riders rumbling explosively around town. The Harley Hogs routinely violate noise ordinances in Milwaukee and its suburbs, not to mention cities and towns and rural hamlets across the nation. It's a plague of tailpiping noise and air polluters. So this is one person's opinion. Just how widespread is the problem? Check online and you'll find complaints about Harley noise across the continent, from Boston to Chicago, Denver to San Francisco, Toronto to Pennsylvania, Wilmington, North Carolina. Even in the quietest reaches of America's national parks, you can run into the sonic booms of Harley riders. We heard the Harley noise everywhere in Yellowstone National Park while trying to enjoy the solitude of a beautiful place, writes a member of one poor vacationing family. Not to pick on Harleys, I think they're gorgeous bicycles, motorcycles. However, for me, it's an example of empty noise. It serves no mechanical function, it is noise. Okay? Do you have other situations in your life that are just noise? Empty noise?
Yeah, political ads.
And political ads? Empty noise?
Ballots in the news.
Various ads. Sometimes the news feels like empty noise, doesn't it? Because didn't I just hear this bad news yesterday? Right? Okay, so we have these kinds of examples in our lives. Cora Dietrich Fillmore says, the trouble with reforms has been that we, apparently, have tried to compel others to change their ways without changing their hearts. Now, this is another aspect of noise. Change ways without changing hearts. And there are always arguments made, and it can go the other way, that when we force people to act in a certain way for a long enough period, their hearts will come in behind. However, unity suggests that it's really consciousness, that we need to look at our heart and change our heart and our consciousness first, and then the actions change. And we know this is the kind of thing that can happen, right? It's again that noise of forcing something when the beliefs and the hearts aren't there. We find in Ephesians, let me read this little longer piece here. I pray that you may be strengthened in your inner being and power through the Spirit, and that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith as you are being rooted and grounded in love. This is in Ephesians 3, and it's all about Christ dwelling in hearts. In the next chapter, and I don't think this is a mistake, I think this is very intentional. In the next chapter, we read about behavior. First, we read about changing hearts, and then we read about behavior. I beg you to lead a life worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, making every effort to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. So when we look at zeal and genius as the accomplishment of something extraordinary, because of that zeal being put behind it, we often think about zeal as action, right? Zeal as action. But the first thing that comes is a different kind of energy, and that's this kind of energy, right? That internal energy, that consciousness, that praying that Christ may dwell in our hearts first. And sometimes we get the cart in front. And we get lots of action or lots of noise and lots of hubbub, but what is the purpose here? What is really going on and why? Yesterday, I'll go back a couple of weeks, there was a science, technology, engineering fest at one of the parks, and we went over there in the morning, and and there was a table set up by the ham radio group, and Zoya became real intrigued with ham radio. So they said, well, we have a meeting in the library, second Saturday of every month, 9 a.m. So Zoya and I went yesterday. And we saw an amazing example of a very poorly run business meeting, which was very informative for Zoya. And I think all of the members knew it too, because there was a lot of frustration among them as to how can we do this more effectively. And one of the things they were talking about was that their membership has dropped off. And I said, what do people gain by being a member of this group? And one of the guys said, that's the question. And nobody could come up with anything that someone would gain by being a member of this group. So just one more example of how we get action in front of purpose, right? Or action in front of ideal, action in front of our own goal. Simon the Zealot is the holder of zeal. Charles Fillmore looked at all of these 12 powers, and he identified one of the 12 disciples as sort of the holder of this power. And he identified Simon the Zealot. Now, we can look at these words, the zealot, okay? Zealots lived in the mountains. They were fighting the Romans for the ideal of a free nation. Okay? And Simon was part of this group. So he was kind of a renegade up there, and they were fighting. That's what their lives were about. Their lives were geared toward fighting for this goal. They were pushing and resisting. Pushing for a different government and resisting the government was there, lodged in resentment and anger. And you could say it was well justified resentment and anger because they were being very poorly treated. The end result, however, was an expenditure of human energy. Okay? Putting lots of action out there. Now, when Simon the Zealot became a disciple, he took that zeal, this kind of zealot zeal, and he moved it into his name, Simon, which means one who hears and obeys. And he chose to listen to a different message. Instead of listening to the message of renegade and rebel and fighting and resisting, he chose to listen to the message of Jesus about love and cooperation. We know that zeal, when directed by judgment and wisdom and tempered by love and harmony, becomes something entirely different. It can work toward a very important purpose, but what's underneath it is something else. It's in Unity, we tithe. This is a tithing organization, and we tithe out, and we've started now tithing once a quarter to a local organization. But what we had to ask ourselves on the leadership group is, what organizations do we want to tithe to locally and why? Because what Unity says is, if you give money to a problem, you are reinforcing the problem. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we want to support is an organization that is doing good. And really have that in our heads. Why are we supporting them? Because they are doing good, and we want to support their good. So that's really the kind of switch that we're talking about here. Some of this is it's a heart switch of saying, I am putting energy into something, not because I'm resisting and resenting and I'm pushing and I'm angry, but because I am guided by divine wisdom and my energy is tempered by love and harmony. Don't those feel different? They feel different, and they come from a different place, and they have different kinds of results. We wind up with something that is more like allowing the good in our lives, allowing the good in the lives of people around us, and we wind up in a spot of joy and enthusiasm as we support something positive, right? Whole different feeling. And an experience, I'm sorry.
There's still
April keeps
another.
taking a picture.
There's still
Is there
another
more?
one.
There, okay. April keeps taking a picture of the slide that's not quite complete in every case. And so instead of a draining experience, expenditure of human energy where we're tight and resistant and angry, we wind up with an experience where we can feel joy, and we can feel allowing, and we can feel an experience of oneness with spirit. Knowing, hey, I'm on a path, and this path is blessed, and I know where I'm going, and I know why I'm going there, and I don't have to be uptight and resentful. I can support something good in my life, in someone else's life, in the universe. And Charles Fillmore says, kind of capturing it in a nutshell, the way he often does, do not let zeal run away with your judgment. Judgment comes first. Judgment or wisdom. Judgment as in knowing what to do, when, and how. That kind of judgment. Not judging, but judgment as in wisdom. That comes first. And then after that, we push in our zeal and say, I've got something I want to do with this. It's this kind of zeal. The flame that burns but does not destroy. So I think any of us in our life, if we're starting to feel burned out, it's a good time to step back and ask, what am I doing, and why am I doing it? And how am I doing this? Is there another way for me to approach this? Is there another way for me to go about this? that feeds me instead of drains me. And it might have to do with any of these things we're talking about today. Are we supporting good? Do we know what our purpose is? Are we working in cooperation and coordination and collaboration with others? Are we allowing the divine message and the divine energy to come in? In Exodus, we read about Moses. He was out keeping the flock. He was tending his sheep. He was just doing what he did every day. And there the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. The bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Now, isn't that a nice little phrase to take with us? Blazing but not consumed. What is there in my life that I want to be blazing about and is not going to consume me? Because of the way I'm approaching it and letting divine energy come into this. So this morning on CBS Sunday Morning, there's a story about Devin Doss, who was a Seventh-day Adventist and a conscientious objector in World War II. And he wound up as a medic at the Battle of Okinawa. And one day he rescued 70 injured people from the battlefield, all by himself. 70 injured people from the battlefield. Genius, extraordinary zeal in support of a purpose. Here was a guy, conscientious objector, said, I'm not going to carry a gun in this war. And he rescued them with no sidearm, nothing. He went out and rescued each one of them, one at a time. Yet he was supporting good in his life, right? It gives me a whole different image about what it can mean to look at a situation like war and say, I'm not going to support that war, but what can I do? What is a positive contribution I can make, even in the spite of this situation, with my energy and my zeal? So he rescued 70 people that day. And in the Vietnam era, the Seventh-day Adventists set up a camp in Michigan to train medics, because that's what they saw as their role in that situation. To send people who were conscientious objectors as medics and able to do good. Example of zeal, extraordinary energy put forward for some kind of goal. So we see this stuff around us all the time. And part of it is paying attention to what we see. So do you want to be a genius? Extraordinary zeal in the accomplishment of an ideal develops what is called genius. It's accessible to each of us all the time. So you can ask yourself, right? What do you want to say yay about? Right? What do you want to say yay about? What can you put your zeal behind in a divine way that supports a purpose that is meaningful to you, supports good, and just might be meaningful to someone else too? So thank you for that.